All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to our webinar on the Sundance Film Festival. I'm going to get our presentation up and loaded. Actually, let's do just the window that I want. All right. Perfect. Okay. So I am going to get started. We are just about a minute after 5:30, so I want to stay prompt for everyone's time. Anybody who is watching locally from the Colorado Denver area, I hope you braved the snow today. I don't know how this is possible. Where I am, it's like 60, 75% melted, and we were like 6 inches this morning. So, this is going to be a presentation on the Sundance Film Festival's new home that is going to be here in Colorado in Boulder starting in 2027 for the foreseeable future. So, my name is Christina Moss. I'm an agent with Good Neighbor Realty. We specialize in short-term rentals, specifically throughout the state of Colorado. And let's jump right in. So, to go over kind of like the big points of what you can expect, we're going to be reviewing tonight. The first is the biggest is going to be the Sundance Film Festival and how it impacted Airbnb revenue in Utah and what we're projecting that's going to mean for Colorado in the future. We've got a great website that we use to pull some real data from that. So we really avoid any guesswork here at the brokerage and make sure we pull really good facts to back up all of our projections. Then we'll talk about how much money that you can expect to make with a short-term rental during Sundance month. Sundance only lasts for 10 days, but the way that this has been studied historically is how much money you can capture in the month, because typically people come a little early, they'll stay a little late, they might make a trip out of it. I'm going to go over why now is an ideal time to prepare before the 2027 surge begins in January next year. We'll talk about local regulations in Boulder County and unincorporated Boulder, as well as revenue projections for a couple of example properties that are on the market right now that will qualify for great short-term rental Sundance opportunities. And then we're definitely going to hit how to pay significantly less in taxes if you choose to buy this year, which is one of the primary reasons that me and my family choose to invest in short-term rentals. So I'll make sure I hit on that. A quick little bit about me and how I got here. Both me and my husband, we are chiropractors and we own our own clinic in Boulder County. I've had that going since 2018, and in 2024, I got pregnant and had a baby. And I thought that I would take a little bit of time off on maternity leave and come back to the practice. And it turned out that I really enjoyed motherhood a little more than I thought I was going to, which was a pleasant surprise for me. So we decided that I would stay home a little bit longer to be with our son. And my husband hired an associate chiropractor, and they still run that clinic today. But what ended up happening is any other parents out there might know, like sometimes maternity leave can get a little boring, especially if you are like an entrepreneur, you're used to working. So I got bored on maternity leave. I started to educate myself about the short-term rental loophole. I launched a short-term rental last year, and my goal was just to make a couple $1,000s a month, ideally kind of help feel like I'm contributing a bit to the household. But what I ended up learning is that owning this short-term rental, I was able to offset the taxable income from me and my husband's practice. So this is now becoming an annual strategy for us, and I'll make sure I go ahead and really break down exactly how to qualify for the STR loophole and how the whole tax stuff breaks down. So one of the things that I came up against when launching my short-term rental is I had all of these problems that I didn't know how to solve. And Good Neighbor Realty genuinely solved all of my problems, my real estate problems. So one of the big things that a lot of people are concerned about is like, well, is Airbnb or Vrbo, is it oversaturated? Is there too much competition? How do I stand out? Well, the Realty teaches our clients and uses our agents to teach us how to use AirDNA, which pulls data from the calendars and the booking rates and the nightly rates from active Airbnbs and creates gross annual projections based off of the actual bookings of every listing on Airbnb and Vrbo, which is incredible. Another big issue that I came up against and something I was nervous about is like, well, how do I find vendors? Like, how do I find trusted vendors? And you need a lot of different vendors, like when you really start to break it down. Like your core team is going to be, your cleaners, your handyman, but things like a last minute plumber or electrician, all those things really overwhelmed me. So the brokerage helped step in and said, hey, we have a solution to all of that for pretty much any county in Colorado, which is amazing. Then if you're launching an Airbnb, you might be worried like, hey, well, how do I have enough time to actually manage this? A lot of people assume like, hey, I'm just going to pass this off to a property manager. I don't have time, I am busy, or I just don't want to. And so a lot of what the brokerage came in and helped me with was they provided automation guides for really automating a lot of the communication between the guests, minus like small, very specific things. There was a really great community at the brokerage that I found as well. So sometimes when you are in the investigative stage of considering buying an investment property, it might feel a little bit like you're alone on an island. And there are monthly Airbnb happy hours and meetups at local successful Airbnbs. So you can show up, you can meet other people in the Colorado area who are thinking about doing it or actively doing it, and you get to do it inside of an active, successful Airbnb, see how it's designed, hear a presentation about how much money they spend, how much money they make, and it all just feels a little bit more tangible. And some of the more like logistic things of what can be overwhelming with trying to launch and run a short-term rental, understanding the legislation in Colorado can feel super overwhelming. Sometimes on, one side of the town, you're allowed to do short-term rental, on the other side, you're not. And Google might tell you, all yes or all no. And so the last thing anybody wants ever in the short-term rental world is to buy a piece of property and then it turns out you legally cannot operate as a short-term rental. So having a brokerage that helped guide me in understanding, okay, where can I feel secure in placing a large sum of money and investing in real estate? And they provide a online course, and so we can talk about that a little bit at the end as well. A really amazing online course. If you are a self-learner, if you love to not only trust somebody with a lot of great information, but really digest it and understand it yourself, there's a really amazing online course that walks you through, finding the property, setting it up, launching it, post-launch. And probably the most important problem that Good Neighbor Realty solves is underwriting challenges. So underwriting meaning, what is every single expense that I need to think of as an Airbnb unit, from pest control to hot tub maintenance to my cleaning fees to, of course, my mortgage, and then crunching all of that against the money that I'm expected to earn. Well, is this property actually going to pay for itself? Am I going to be floating the mortgage on some months? And so I would say hands down, that was one of the biggest real estate problems in the investor world that was solved. So for me, Good Neighbor Realty was an absolute like lifesaver for being a first-time investor. And as I started to see how they could really solve all my problems, I quickly realized that I wanted to join that team and help bring these solutions to other short-term rental investors. So when we talk about the Sundance Film Festival, up until this point, for many, many years, it has existed in Utah. And they just announced recently that it is going to be the new home in Boulder. So we'll go over like exactly where that is. But what I do want to at least talk about a little bit is like, well, what is this festival? I think a lot of people may have heard of Sundance, but I wanted to give like a really succinct description. The Sundance Film Festival is one of the world's most influential independent film festivals where filmmakers, celebrities, think like, Tom Cruise, and industry leaders gather to premiere new films and shape what's new in entertainment. So this is a very much like a groundbreaking, almost like royalty sense in the film world. And for our really in our backyard, for this to be the new home base, it is such an honor and very, very exciting, not only from a short-term rental standpoint, but truly just like an honor that our state now gets to host this. So this is something that I think is really interesting is, okay, we have this really big, prestigious film festival coming to our state. What does it actually mean with like people coming in? So some quick stats just in the last 2 years on the Sundance Film Festival is in 2025, they had just over 85,000 attendees participate, purchase tickets, and attend the festival. That was a 17% increase from the year before in 2024, which is like a quite staggering increase year over year. Because we're in a new location, we are projecting a little bit on what we believe and how that's going to translate to Colorado's attendance. We anticipate that Boulder is going to either match around 80,000 or continue the increase, as well as I think there's like a bit of an excitement of a new location. We could see upwards of 100,000 people attendees in 2027. What all these attendees did coming to Utah is for the short-term rental scene, for hotels, for arts, for restaurants, they've calculated that in 2025 alone, it brought in $196 million into Utah. So this is such an economy boosting, tourism boosting event that is coming to Boulder. And so as a short-term rental investor myself, now working as a real estate agent guiding other short-term rental investors, this is where I think we really need to be putting our sights to help Boulder. Because if you know anything about Boulder, it is very small. Like, all things considered, it is not a huge town to be able to host what could be 100,000 people coming in. So if you've driven around at all in the last couple of years, they've been like building new hotels and there's been a lot of changes happening, and I guarantee you this has something to do with it. So where are all these people going? So for the event itself, some of the big auditoriums are going to be held on this map here. But instead of me going through and kind of like naming all of them, I want you to think like central to Pearl Street, which is a very well-known area of the Boulder community. So there is going to be a strong desire to be as close to the festival as possible for some people. There's also going to be a really strong desire for people who are visiting who want to feel like they're really in the classic Colorado mountain experience. And so we're very lucky that Boulder is tucked so close to the foothills. And that, within 20, 25 minutes, sometimes even less in some cases, there are properties that will qualify for being able to host these people who are coming to this event. So one of the most important things that any investor is interested in is, well, how much money am I going to be expected to make? So I want to just talk about Utah for a minute, and then we're going to do our best to translate that to the Colorado market and talk about what areas you're actually allowed to purchase a property and areas that you can get a special festival license if you already own property in the city of Boulder. So I got this data from AIR, ROI, which I will send out this link to everybody who's participated in the webinar. And it is a really amazing high level breakdown of over several years, as well as specifically 2025, how we've measured the changes in the short-term rental market, specifically on Airbnb. So what we found, or what ROI found is that the top 10% of short-term rental properties were making $15,000 a month. And then there's a plus sign to that. So there's certainly properties that were bringing in much more than that. But if we're going to do our best to create some reasonable, achievable averages to share in the median, expect at least $15,000 a month. And I will also go over in a minute what you could expect during a normal month of January in Boulder when there was not a Sundance Film Festival happening. For what it's worth, our brokerage, our whole goal is to help people put out top 5% best in class properties. So there is a strategy, there is an algorithm, and the majority of our clients are going to be falling in this top 10%. On a more, I would say, like above average operation, top 25%, you can expect to earn 10,000 or more, and then you can see how that trickles down to typical properties and entry-level properties. But I'm hoping everybody watching this today is going to strive to be at least above average, if not best in class. So here is a really good month-by-month breakdown from AirDNA. So if you don't know what AirDNA is, AirDNA, I mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of information, so I'm just going to repeat myself a little bit so we don't get lost. AirDNA helps us understand, based off of the booking calendar and the nightly rates, how much money other properties are making annually on Airbnb. So what I've done is I've gone to Boulder County and I found the properties that do qualify for short-term rentals, ranging from 3 to 5 bedroom. I collected about 50 of them, so ranging from like high performers to mid performers, and it gave me this graph here. And so the one thing I want to like really bring attention to on this map is where the peak season is for Boulder County in the short-term rental market and where the low season is. So again, an average range of 50 or so short-term rentals ranging in variable bedrooms is averaging, again, top performers, as high as $30,000 a month in the peak season of July. June, July, August are going to be one of the strongest performing months for travelers and tourism in this area. And then we're going to kind of have a gradual decline. We'll have a small increase through the December holiday season. And as you can see, kind of trickling in, looking at January, February, traditionally and historically in the short-term rental market, you like are making 10% of what you normally make in the summer. So this is sharing January 2027. There's no Sundance Film Festival. Monthly revenue is estimated at under $4,000. So what we do when we're looking at properties is we're going to be underwriting properties as if there is no Sundance Film Festival, but we want to bring the context to you that you can assume that if you create a desirable short-term rental for somebody who is traveling to this festival to stay at, you should be able to, let's just kind of put you in this middle range here, add an additional $10,000 to $15,000 plus to what would normally be maybe a $2,500 to $3,500 a month. So big difference. Especially if you are breaking even on a property, if you are profiting on a property already, which is most people's goals when they're investing, you're just adding $10,000 to $15,000 or more as net profit minus the added expenses that come with having more people in the property because your occupancy is going to be higher in January. So when I say Boulder, it's really important to understand the legislation of Boulder County because Boulder is not like, if we were talking about Park County and I say Bailey, when I say Bailey, I mean the whole town of Bailey. When I say Boulder, it is broken up into multiple areas in the eyes of legislation and where you can do short-term rental. So truthfully, this map is actually from a month ago when I did this presentation in person. So these licenses might be off by a couple, but very accurate still, all in all. One thing I want to mention is that when we're talking about Boulder, I am almost always referring to unincorporated Boulder County. So when you're looking at this map here, that's going to be your upper St. Vrain. It's also going to be your Bald Mountain. So that's your two big left chunks on this map here that are encased with the purple. If you kind of look down towards the bottom of this map, you can see Nederland. If you just want to kind of orient yourself with what we're looking at here, I feel like that's a pretty well-known area of unincorporated Boulder County. So kind of all through these foothills, all the way up through the west side of Lyons are going to be areas where there are still licenses available and that you're allowed to do short-term rental. The nice thing about Boulder County and why really smart investors are going to be choosing to invest here is there are limited amount of licenses that are left. So when I spoke to the short-term rental license processor in the county earlier this year, he told me he would put money on it that by the end of the year or early next year, these licenses will be on a wait list and you won't be able to buy here anymore. I think especially as this festival really proves its fiscal value to the county, to other investors, to restaurant owners, to people who live in the city of Boulder, people are going to savvy up and realize that this is going to be a really good investment. And so a smart investor gets into an area where there are licenses available, but there are caps because this is going to limit your competition overall. And now you hold a golden ticket that not everybody can compete with. The other thing I want to go over is that the city of Boulder, so that's going to be, if you're looking at the right side of the map, you can see kind of what people think of when they think of Boulder, Pearl Street, and kind of the surrounding neighborhoods. Traditionally, you cannot have a short-term rental in Boulder. So a lot of people, like if you're talking to investors, they'll be like, oh, Boulder's not friendly, which if you're talking about the city of Boulder within the confines of the city, that's very much true. They do not allow you to put your property as a full-time business on Airbnb or VRBO. However, if you happen to own a property in Boulder, the town of Boulder, they are going to grant both renters as well as homeowners temporary festival licenses. So I can also share some information and some links about that in an email blast at the end for everybody who attended. However, this is a very small fee, and Boulder is doing their best to acknowledge, hey, we know that accommodation and lodging is going to be very tricky for us during this festival. And so they are allowing people to move out of their homes, list their property temporarily during the Sundance Film Festival time period. And there's kind of like a window for which they're allowing that to take place, and capture money. So you don't necessarily have to be a short-term rental investor to capture the Sundance Film Festival financial surge and benefit that's coming. But if you are still kind of in your researching phase, if you are still thinking about where am I going to invest for my next short-term rental, we have these areas in Colorado that are like our bread and butter that everybody invests in and does really well. But at a certain point, it is going to make the most sense to start expanding and looking at some of these other markets like unincorporated Boulder County, where there are licenses that are still available. If any of you attended Jonathan's webinar last night about mountain towns that you should kind of have on your radar for your next short-term rental investment, I know Jefferson County was one that he hit on, so kind of surrounding the Red Rocks area. And then the next one he talked about was unincorporated Boulder. So that made me very happy. One thing that I think is important to just kind of like bring to light is what it takes to buy and set up a short-term rental. And so there are two different, I would say, like buckets of people who come through the brokerage who are interested in finding a property. They are either trying to capture as much cash flow as possible, or they're trying to capture as much tax write-off and benefit as possible. So when it comes to capturing as much money as possible, if you look at the chart, We are currently in early May. If you were to think about buying a property in the next month or so, it gives you enough time to acquire a property, close on it, furnish it, and hopefully be launching sometime between July or August to be capturing the peak months as you're kind of going into the slower months. It's nice to start your investment with the most money possible. The other camp of people who are investing tend to be folks who are trying to offset their taxable income. And so those people tend to wait to start to the fall to start looking, because that's when they've got a good idea of how much money they've made between themselves and their spouse and how much money that they ideally need to offset. So if you are somebody who is very passionate and driven by trying to achieve as much positive cash flow, if you're trying to diversify your streams of income, if you're trying to retire a spouse, purchasing a property before the summer boom and getting it live as soon as possible is going to allow you to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go over 2 properties that qualify in unincorporated Boulder County where there are licenses available, and the county will let you put this on Airbnb full-time as a business. I'm going to just give some example scenarios so you can kind of get an idea of how much money these properties could make. So the large box looking at this property here, I've actually been here a couple of times. This property is a 3-bedroom, but it has the capability of being a 5-bedroom if you upgrade the septic tank. So there's a lot of room to force appreciation in this property. But given a scenario, if you qualify for a 6.5% interest rate, if you were to do a 10% down payment, so if we're looking at an $850,000 property almost, we're talking an $85,000 down payment. So the smallest amount down. After you have paid all of your expenses, your mortgage, your interest, your taxes, your overhead of your platform fees at Airbnb and Vrbo take, your cleaning fees, anything that we've thought of, your guests have paid down all of that, we still expect a property like this to profit you $26,000 annually, or on average, a little over $2,000 a month. This does not include our projections for what the Sundance Film Festival is bringing. So when you take into consideration your January, February is likely to be very low performing months, we expect with a property like this at a low end that it should make $10,000 additional on top of that $26,000 annual profit. From a tax perspective, a purchase price of this property in this location should reduce your taxable income about $100,000. This is another one I've shown a couple of people that truthfully I think is one of like our secret stellar hot properties on the market right now. This is under 20 minutes from Pearl Street. It has a pool, and like you just don't see pools really in Colorado, but this property is so beautiful. It has these beautiful mountain views. The home itself it's fine. It's not like a beautiful cabin or anything, but it creates this seclusion and has all of these flowers around it and a beautiful pool. And so the only downside of like why I don't want to overplay this is for the Sundance Film Festival, the pool is not going to be a big driver, right? Like it's January. However, if you are purchasing a short-term rental and you're worried about making money all year long, your summer months are going to absolutely like clean house with a property like this. So given a scenario, if you bought this at asking price, which is 1.1, you qualify for a 6.5 interest rate, you put 10% down, we would expect that after everything is paid and done, that this would profit you $36,000 annually, or on average about $3,000 a month. And just because I'm capped at the Sundance Air ROI estimates, I'm going to very conservatively say $15,000 a month in Sundance earnings in January. But honestly, even though the pool wouldn't be active, I think you'd probably push higher in the Sundance earnings just for this really cool location. When it comes to a tax perspective for a purchase price on a property like this, you can expect likely a reduction in $370,000 to $400,000 in taxable income. So let's talk a little bit about the tax stuff, because these are really big numbers. And if you aren't familiar with the short-term rental loophole, I want to put you onto this now, or at least review it with you if this is still like a newer topic that you're trying to digest. What accelerated or bonus depreciation is the IRS looks at a short-term rental as active income. So there are some requirements. You do have to self-manage the property for the first year. We'll talk about that in a moment. However, if you self-manage the first year that you own it, the IRS looks at this as an active business that you're running. And rather than if you were to have a long-term tenant in it, for example, with a long-term rental, that's a very passive model of income. Those passive models allow you to take small tax deductions over the course of like 27 and a half years. What a short-term rental allows you to do is you can accelerate all, 20 to 30 years of depreciation that you can usually take a little bit year over year, all in the first year. And so here's kind of like an example scenario of what that would look like. If you buy a $1.2 million property, just to keep numbers even and easy here, we first have to subtract the land value from this overall equation, because in the eyes of the IRS, the land cannot be depreciated. Now we're working with a $1 million purchase price of the real estate that sits on top of the land. What you would then do after you close on the property is you would hire a company that comes in and they create something called a cost segregation report. And they're going to create this huge document where they line item all of the items that make up the real estate of the house that will allow you or that could be depreciated. So things like doorknobs and backsplash and molding, right? So in this scenario with this $1 million property, we would estimate that a cost segregation study would identify $300,000 in assets that you could use for faster depreciation. This is the coolest part though. That $300,000 loss does not just exist against the income of the short-term rental business. You can take that loss against your W-2 income job, your corporate job. So if you have if you own a corporation, if you're a small business owner, LLC, if you have other types of real estate investments, and this also carries through to your spouse. And so this is a very powerful strategy that a lot of spouses use, where especially you've got one high earning spouse and another spouse that wants to contribute, but maybe it doesn't make sense for them to do a 9 to 5. Or doing a 9 to 5 doesn't make as much money as they might be able to save their spouse in taxes. So in this scenario, for somebody who operates or files their taxes in a 32nd percentile tax bracket, it would save almost 6 figures in tax savings. So in a scenario where, doing a 9 to 5, if you're not making at least $96,000 a year, well, what if you could save your spouse, or you could save yourself from coming out of pocket with that money, or receiving a really healthy tax return check from the IRS if you are a W-2 employee and you do prepay those taxes through your paychecks and your pay stubs. So this is really the biggest kind of secret gold mine in the short-term rental world that truthfully, when we launched our short-term rental, I had no idea. I was trying to make $2 or $3 grand a month. I was happy with that. As soon as we learned that this existed, it changed the whole game for our whole family. So when I say you have to manage it yourself, this is really where myself as well as our team at Good Neighbor Realty come in, and we help set up your team for you. So when I do my best to set expectations for our investors, I almost always share that you should expect, once you have everything dialed in, to spend 1 to 2 hours per week managing your property. And I think 1 to 2 hours a week to profit, let's call it $20,000 to $30,000 a year, maybe save $96,000 in taxes or get that returned to us, feels like a really fair exchange. On top of all of that, you're still a real estate investor. Someone else has paid down this asset for you, and in 20 years, you've got a really cool extra way to leverage your retirement, to pass on to your children, create generational wealth. And so the way that you do that is in the very, very first year that you have it, you self-manage. And this is where I help you build your team. Your cleaner, handyman, landscaper, snow removal. There's going to be some other people who kind of float on the sides that you're going to need from time to time. But as long as you have these core four, you've built your own property management company. You don't need to outsource this to somebody. One really cool thing that people love with our brokerage is off-market homes. So in the event Boulder is not calling your name, but you are interested in investing in short-term rentals, we constantly have properties, some that are perfectly performing, ready to launch tomorrow, and some that need a little bit of TLC before you get them on market, but they're already 75% of the way there. So these are just 3 examples of off-market properties that we have right now through the brokerage. You can reach out if you are interested in chatting about any of them. And the last thing that I want to let everybody know is that if you are not already working with a real estate agent through the Good Neighbor brokerage, or if you just haven't made contact yet, then I want you to expect a call from me. So I have everyone's registration. This is my phone number ending in 3068. If you see me calling in the next day or two, even if you just say, hey, Christina, thanks for the great info, I'm not interested right now, I would love to figure out how I can be helpful to you either now or sometime in the future. If you wanted to get ahead of that, I'd love for you to book a call with me. If you are investor curious, if you have a current short-term rental, if you own a property in Boulder and you're interested to see if you fall within the area where you can get a temporary Boulder Festival license, I can be a lot of help to many people outside of just purchasing a new property. So this is my QR code. You are absolutely welcome to take a picture of this and go to my Calendly website and book a call. Otherwise, if you see me calling, try not to send me to voicemail because I'd love to chat. Keeping in touch with me, most of my communication, if it is not like through email or my phone, I'm very, very active on Instagram. So my handle is Christina, the Cash Flow Agent. At the very least, give me a follow and we can kind of stay in touch and you can watch how things are moving and grooving through the short-term rental market. So I am going to stop sharing my screen from here. And if there are any questions in the Q&A, I am happy to answer them for you now, or we can always chat later, but I just wanted to give anyone the opportunity if you wanted to drop a question in Q&A, or if you wanted to even hop on, turn your video on or turn on your mic and ask a question, I'm happy to stick around for a couple of minutes. Anybody? All right. Well, I don't see anything coming up in the Q&A. Does anyone want to hop in, unmute their mic and ask any questions? Okay, so I saw a question come in. Can we apply for a temporary festival license now? Yes. So I have spoken to a couple of people who have already gotten this license. So there is a link that is up and live on the Boulder County short-term rental website. I can send that to you directly, or honestly, you can just Google temporary Boulder Festival lodging license, and it should take you right to the page and you can apply. They're pretty well priced too. Cool. All right, guys. Well, I wanted to say thank you again for coming. I hope this was helpful. I look forward to hopefully connecting with a few of you at some point in the next coming days, and be safe out there. Take care.